Connesty, how are ye? Welcome to the Candlelit Tales Podcast. My name is Aron, and I am sitting down in my own room with the other two co-founders of Candlelit Tales, my sister Sorcha and Ruairi O'Shea. How are you getting on, Roo?
Hey.
I often forget to mention, that you're the other, basically the co-founder of Candlelit Tales, so I don't always get to say it. But you're the first person who ever brought music to Candlelit Tales, and you're the only person who's managed to put up with two Hegartys for over 5 years, which is impressive.
No one else has lasted that long. We had that 1 week without you when it wasn't great.
I know we had a whole
Shadows of the Dawn, was it?
We had a whole show
came
without
into
you.
it.
Yeah.
Literally where we got Oisín was replacing you and all of the things you do musically and just fucking everything else, mostly stabilizing ways as well. And Oisín came in to fill that role, and now you're working in tandem on the podcast, which is fantastic. So lads, we have this is the Voyage. This is the end of the Voyage series, and we're trying to block our podcast off into the series is now, and the voyages we've talked about recently. We had a great chat with Kevin Ceolan from Fireside Bard recently, and we were talking about the similarities that these stories have. And yes, if you've listened to the stories and you've gotten them confused and you're mixing them up and you don't know which one is which, that's okay. Me too. I'm the same. They're basically identical. There's a lot of similarities. And Sorcha, can you kind of maybe say less words but explain what I'm trying to say?
I will psychically download Aaron's thoughts and put them into verbal human communication. Sorry, that is my job in this company.
My job is just to set it to music,
and then Roo sets it to music. That's exactly how this all works. The Voyage stories have a very specific template, and there are small enough variations between the different ones, and you also get that thing where a lot of the time there are ones that are kind of rewritten. So Meal Duinn, this story, and the Voyage of Brendan, which is about the Christian saint who goes into the other world, they're almost identical in terms of the islands they visit. Certainly the other world bit of the story is like nearly the same. There is a tree branch that's really trying to break my roof down. I don't know if it's going through the mic, but I apologize. But that's what that is. So yeah, there's a very clear template with an awful lot of crossover and similarity.
Thank you. Okay, that's pretty good, because we actually got a question on YouTube. That's what I meant. That's what I said. Basically what I said. And it's just exciting to have. And look, we had a very exciting Easter. We had a whole live stream thing.
We will have had.
We will have had. It's so annoying recording these post shows in advance of releasing before you do stuff. My tenses and timey-wimey is a thing we talk about anyway. But Jesus Christ, lads, it's very difficult to talk about the future in the past tense.
Yeah. I spent too much time yesterday figuring out if I gained an hour or lost an hour.
I had to give that some serious consideration as well.
I don't. Yeah.
And then I eventually decided that it was a mystery and I was not going to ask any more questions. I lay down on the floor for a while. It was fine. I think it's meant to be the other way around, actually. I think you're meant to get
I personally stayed in bed longer, so I got an hour longer sleep.
That was probably a good call. Rather than contemplating time and giving yourself a headache.
Time is subjective. Yeah. He's right. Like just stay in bed as long as you want and it'll all be fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, Ruth. So before we get on to our Invasions series, which is coming next, stay tuned as we go through all of the various tribes that came to Ireland in the mythic sense. We will be delving into that next. But before we do that, we have the last story to dissect, understand, interpret it, and get our heads around. The Voyage of Meal Duinn is a mental one, more mental than most, you would say. Yep. And I guess we've talked about the similarities it has with the Voyage of Brendan. I still don't know how to say his name. And I guess the repetition, the islands are almost identical in a lot of the ways. Even the three brothers coming onto the boat, that's more than he should have brought, identical in plot point. But Sorcha, you mentioned an interesting theme that this story has that I didn't quite cop at the time. It's a, as you put it, deconstruction of the warrior code. Can you talk a bit about this? Expand on it.
I think this is a fascinating story. I love this story for many reasons, but one of the things I love about it is a little bit like the Acalav na Señorica, the Oisín and Patrick dialogue that we looked at earlier this month. This is a real culture clash between a new way of thinking, a new kind of Christian ethos of forgiveness, and an older honor code system that's that's like very clan based and very much about, you know, an eye for an eye. And in this story, there's this wonderful bit of dramatic irony where, like, Meal Duinn doesn't know that his father raped his mother. He's unaware of this fact about his own birth. And so when he's told that he needs to avenge his father's death, he goes to avenge his father's death. And it's already complicated for the audience because the audience already knows this guy does not deserve to be avenged. This was not a good man. He would not have been a good father, right? And then this the what the other world becomes in this story then is it like a place where he confronts himself, sheds things he doesn't need. Like, it's almost like you can nearly see a kind of an emotional growth in this journey. He goes through all of these places, some that are horrifying, some that are beautiful, some that are both, losing the foster brothers one by one to grief and mirth and greed. And then, like, when he finally meets the holy man who tells him, you have to forgive, that becomes his journey home. That becomes his way back to the real world and like the family that he does have, which is obviously his like foster mother who loves him, and the clan that he has, and it involves him letting go of this quest. And so I think it's like, for me, it's got a kind of a special place among the Voyage stories because a lot of them have very similar beats. A lot of them involve people being called away and coming back. A lot of them involve people being called away who then don't come back. And this one just, I think it has some of the most interesting motivations and themes and little bits of complexity in there. So I really like it.
It's the only one who breaks the rule. They go off and they come back and they're able to keep on living in the time that seems to be their time. Like, so it's the only one that breaks the kind of mold, I suppose, of these voyage stories going out to the other world, disappearing your life and your existence and all of your friends and coming back to a different time. Meal Duinn manages
Narnia time rules.
He gets to come back and his dinner is still hot. It's totally different. Like, it's great.
Yeah. So that's as a peculiarity. It's an odd one to point out, but I love this idea of it being a vengeance quest start out and then running into, like, actually what it's more about is this kind of hero's journey of rebirth and coming to a more enlightened kind of sense of what he needs to be as a person, as a man, as a human being, and forgive all and be sound. Which definitely has more of a kind of moralistic maybe message than usually we find.
There's this, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's this weird suggestion that, like, because they broke the rule that the druid set out for them with only having 17 men in the crew, because the foster brothers then decided to jump on, it's like nothing would have happened if that hadn't happened, because they have to keep on questing until they eventually one by one shed all the foster brothers, and then they're immediately that once the last of them is gone, then they can come back. That rule is unbroken.
But if they had 17, there would have been no moral learning.
Well, would anything have happened? I don't know. Like, would they have gone into the other world?
He might have gone directly to the island and killed the man who killed his father. Absolutely nothing could have happened, which is fucking brilliant. I love that. Like, you break the rules of the other world and you get swept into the other world. And, like, as the Fianna know well, sometimes that's where all the good shit is. So sometimes it ends up being kind of a good thing.
And it is a total trope. It's like, oh, a certain number has to be done. If you misstep in any which way, you'll fall down the rabbit hole. And then he falls down the rabbit hole because he gets whatever. And the three brothers follow him, or she follows a rabbit that looks quirky, and whatever. It's just like curiosity and it'll be fine attitude gets him into a whole pile of shite. And I do like that idea of like, oh, maybe it would have been grand, or would have ended up like non-story if the three brothers didn't come. It's kind of like, is there a lesson in that? No.
Not really.
Listen to the druid.
Well, always
balance the pagan ways, old Ireland, with the new Christian forgiveness shit.
Yeah.
I think don't get too run away with the modern way of things. Like the druid still has something very important to say. Listen to the numbers and the figures and the stats that he's given you.
Right. Yeah. Pay attention. Take it down. Don't fuck with it.
17. When he says 17.
He means 17, man. He doesn't mean 17 and a half.
Not 17 plus 3 fucking hitchhikers.
No.
Yeah. No, not allowed. So come here. What do you make of these islands, Rue? It's mental. It's the most mental number of islands. What the fuck does it? Like, you listen to this story most out of all of
times.
Us.
Yeah, I was really like immersed in the mentalness of this story for the last week.
Brilliant.
Well, like Sorcha was saying, like the voyage as a whole is this kind of this journey that he has to undertake in order to develop, in order to learn this forgiveness, in order to come to the place where he needs to be at the end of the story. So I suppose like each island just represents just like, I don't know, the dark recesses of the mind and of the soul, that kind of thing of like going through a dark night of the soul, surviving in it and growing through it. So like each island is just populated with the most batshit stuff that you can think. And like you were saying that like there's a mixture of kind of the beautiful and the terrible and the frightening and stuff. But in fairness, even with the beautiful stuff, there's this constant undercurrent of danger and like temptation and stuff, and like it's honey trap kind of stuff rather than stuff that's just Tirnano beautiful in and of itself. Like the island of women, like there's this suggestion that there's this insidious ploy between them to lure the men in there, to keep them there forever, to do fucking God knows what. And then there's like the island full of the cats. It's like, it's this lovely place. It's really cool. There's a bunch of cats are great, and there's a lovely feast all laid out and stuff, but there's this clear cut rule of like, you can come along, you can pet the cats and have the feast and whatever, but don't take the cat's shit. One of the foster brothers breaks this rule and that's the end of him. So like even there, that there's that kind of fairy tale thing of like, don't upset the place, don't fuck with the place. And then you just have it's just like clipping along at speed, and they're going past an island with a beast that's revolving inside of its own skin, and there's horses that eat each other, and there's pigs on fire, and it's just mentalness and darkness. It's just like like a form put on the darkest recesses of the soul that you can imagine.
That's a really, really good way to put it, actually, I think. And like I think just talking about the rhythm and the driviness, remember playing this live,
it's
like,
always got that.
Yeah, like Sorcha and I, we've swapped it over before. The last time we actually told it live was with Andreas the Stack, where I was telling the story with him, and Sorcha, you were watching it going, yeah, you're both very similar in your performances. The story always elicits the same rhythm. Like it's
just always clipping along, because the way you tell it, like unlike with say the Brendan the Navigator story, where you left out a lot of the details of the island and whatnot, you've always chosen to like really get the details of the islands as you clip along, and there's just so many of them that you have to proceed at a certain clip going along, and it's just like the boat. Then it's like the storytelling rhythm is the boat clipping along and seeing all these things, and just interspersed with moments where they go onto an island and you delve into it a little more, and then they're back on the boat and they're going and they're seeing this thing, and there's lads throwing nuts and there's cats on fire and whatever.
And like in terms of recall as well, it's one of those ones that's like a bit of a show off of a story, because it's like I couldn't give you the order of the stories because every single time we do it, I have to go and look them up and remember them.
I remember
like,
you applying a mnemonic thing to it, where you do like the groups of the groups of animals, and then the groups of whatever.
There's
it's the weird shit. There's place.
Yeah.
There's weird
monsters.
Shit. There's monsters. There's food islands, and then there's
nuts,
because you get the giant apple tree, and you get the cat houses.
The people with the nuts, they're my favorite.
People with the nuts are.
It is they. We used to look at you and go, and as musicians, and gonna go, and they and past, and they saw people on the islands throwing nuts, and they were saying,
"It is they." And on they went.
I always remember as well telling this story live, because like we get into we get about to the 6th or 7th island, and we'd look at the clock and go, "It's been fucking 25 minutes gone, lads. We need to fucking break our speed and just like hurtle through the next 10 islands."
Spin it up. Oh yeah, absolutely. Every time. It's a great one to tell.
It's a great one to tell live, because it does have that, like, hang on, are you counting? Because there's 27 islands. Did I say 27 islands? I don't know. What are we on now? Next island.
And it's a Wednesday night and everyone's up early in the morning. So, lads, we have to keep this going.
Keep it going. Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant.
It is. It's fantastic. I mean, it just reminds you of that, like, even listening back to it, like that, the live storyness of it, and like that, okay, this could land any which way. And when you're telling it weird enough to the microphone in your own room, as much as I was trying to kind of keep myself on, a motion and a rhythm and keep it going, I struggled to kind of like find the pace for the telling, because it's a lot of information. To clip it along too quick, it blurs it. To stay too long on the islands gets monotonous. So it's this fine dance that I'm not quite sure.
And yet, no, the pace the pace was exactly there. It's to do with like it's a steadiness more so than a speed. Like sometimes doing it live would end up doing it mad fast because of what you were just saying. But like in the recording, completely not set to music originally or whatever, that pace was there. It's just that steady clip along. The boat is moving past an island.
Mm-hmm.
And then he gets to the island of the blessed, and he meets the last dude who tells him, the real lesson, and it flips the whole kind of what you were talking about at the start, Sorcha, the whole Brehon law, the idea of the clan-based rivalry. Well, the clan-based rivalry, the thing that's like he is, it is his duty to go off and kill the murderer of his father according to societal standards at that time.
Yeah,
so suddenly,
I think the Brehon law is kind of a way of trying to keep people from killing each other, but by putting fines on them instead. But no, that whole code of like, your clan hurt me, therefore I get something out of you. Yeah, he meets this hermit who's like, "Nah, man, you just got to forgive." And again, he's not told the details of why his father is a bad guy. He's not even told that his dad is a bad guy. He's just told, this is not the way. You have one chance of getting back home. And it's an interesting one as well, because like, it's so rare in these stories that the other world has rules. And I do think it's very much a kind of a Christian, like, it's obviously a very Christian insertion, but just that whole idea of like, there is a way that you can be led out of this, and it's by following the rules of Yahweh, of this God, and that'll guide you home. Versus like a lot of the times when the Fianna end up in the other world, it's like, don't take people seriously, but also don't. They might be lying to you, but they might not be. Like, it's much murkier in terms of what is the correct thing to do and the other thing to do, and how do you find your way home. Like, it's much less structured for them. So a lot of the time it's just like, they got home because they got home. But it's a lot less rule bound. So I think it's a really interesting one where they're actually presented with this definitive, this is the rule that you now follow, and this is how you get home. And then he, again, is that thing of, he comes to the island and he hears the voice on the waters, and it's totally an internal thing of like, you were saying, Rue, earlier about how if the three foster brothers hadn't jumped on the boat, there would have been no story. And it's also that kind of thing of like, had he come to that hut and thought, nah, fuck you, I'm going to kill you, would this be a totally different story? Would it be a Voyage of Bran one where he gets swept back out again? You know, we don't know. It's kind of fun to think of parallel Meal Duinns.
And that's a real like Christian era kind of thing as well, isn't it? That there is this more obvious kind of duality between good and bad, dark and light, whereas like the older pagan kind of stuff has got this way more random kind of thing going on. Like you're slipping in and out of the other world. Nothing really makes sense. And God will come along and intervene on a whim or just not, and it doesn't. It's not underpinned by that like this is good and this is bad morality thing that the Christian era has.
Like, I think that the morality of Celtic stories and out of Irish myths is so fucking
ambiguous
fascinating.
at best.
Well, like we talked about this in the storytelling course recently, where somebody kind of said, look, you know, why are they like this? Like, is there any good characters in this? And I was like, no, because I think that is a thing that humans have come up with in the last couple of thousand years, and I don't think it's good. This idea that there are good people and bad people, and you are defined by your best or your worst day. Like
I'll pull you up on one. I'll pull you up on one there though. Like you can't use the words good and bad to describe it. So like even by trying to constructively criticize it, using the, but like you need to be careful.
I'm slipping into dual. I am critiquing a viewpoint and not a person. I think you can have a bad idea. I don't think that human beings. I'm also using language. I'm not suggesting that we drop all duality forever, always. Although it's a good place to try and get to when you're meditating. But like, I think, when you're talking about an idea, I'm talking about an idea. I think it is a bad idea to classify human beings who are complex and changing and dynamic into purely good and purely bad. And I think that's what we have been doing for a long time. And some mythologies do that too. And like the Christian mythology very, very much does that. And I think it is oversimplified and not constructive, if you would prefer.
Yeah. Well, that's the kind of funny thing. But I do prefer, because I think when you simplify, you come into a duality of right and wrong or good and bad. The only way out of that is to allude to the more complex aspects of what these things can actually portray, and something that is more fruitful or more bountiful, or it is a more positive spin on things, versus a more negative connotation, or something that will have less fruitfulness from it and less bountifulness from it, less abundance, let's just say. Then you're kind of like, okay, that's a lot. It's a lot grayer. It's less black and white. It is kind of muddier and harder to distinguish. But then it challenges you to pick it apart and go, okay, what is worthwhile in keeping from this, and what's not really worthwhile. And within this story, you have this really interesting, like, sure, you might see a Christian kind of a thing placed upon it, and there's a lot of Christian kind of iconography within the story itself, and the churches and everything, and it's certainly set in a time that is maybe more modern than other myths, but it also has a very Irish flavor to it. You were mentioning the Fionn story, the not obvious ending, and this is quite similar to another quite not obvious ending of heroes not killing their adversary. You know, like they come up to the point.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is in the Fionn McCool, in his youthful deeds. That story follows such a mythic template of the father being killed, the boy on the run, raised in the wilderness, trained to be a hero, sent after the man who killed his father, and he slays the dragon, and then Gull MacMorna, the man who killed his father, is standing in front of him, and Fionn goes, "All right, cool, do you want to work for me?" And it's like, that's not what happens in those stories. As a general rule, that is not how it goes. So it's kind of interesting that as we've been talking about this idea of forgiveness as being a kind of a Christian idea, there's also a very strong trace of it in the pagan tradition in Ireland too, because the greatest heroes forgive. The greatest heroes let people go. Cuchulainn is another one who lets people go sometimes from single combat, although he's a lot less kind than Fionn. He's way more aggressive in general.
Forgiveness
But,
wouldn't
like,
have been the first trait that I'd associate with Cú Chulainn.
He
Did
occasionally
he kill a lad for waking him up one time?
He did kill a lad for waking him up. He's not gentle, our boy. He's not gentle, our wee lad from Ulster. But it is a trait of the greatest heroes that they actually forgive, and it doesn't make them look weak.
And does Cú Chulainn do that?
He does. He lets off a couple of people very rarely. But even the bit in the Táin where he runs before Fergus McRoy, like that's a real kind of moment of tension, because he very much doesn't want to do it and he really resists it. But the idea of running before an enemy, like that's your reputation completely gone. And so the fact that he actually does it and he doesn't fight, and there's another guy that he doesn't kill in the Táin because he squeezes the shite out of him instead and says, you can live, but what kind of life will it be?
That's not better.
I'm not saying
this is your example.
I'm not saying he's particularly magnanimous. I'm just saying that it's an exception.
I don't think I'm won over by that. Yeah, there was that time with Fergus McRoy and then that guy he squeezed. So yeah, forgiveness.
I'm not saying he's forgiving as a character. I'm just saying that only the top ones ever let anybody go, because the tradition
I wonder
is never let anybody go.
I wonder if it's the lack of stuff like that in Cú Chulainn would be what I would see as the lack of stuff like that in Cú Chulainn would be the thing that was keeping him back from being viewed as like the people's champion and stuff, because like we know he was the greatest warrior and all that kind of crack, but there was this reluctance by the people of Ulster to accept him as their champion. Conal Cernach, who was not an almighty super god warrior but was still a big badass, and yet he probably was more capable of those kind of social mores than Cú Chulainn was, because Cú Chulainn was a young lad who'd fly off the handle, like
totally. Cú Chulainn is a total little psychopath who's not well socialized at all.
Who's not well.
There's a lot of psychos in Irish men. I mean, Meal Duinn seems like a fairly well-rounded fella. Like he just gets slagged by a friend and goes, "Hey, ma'am, what's going on? You're not my ma'am." Shit. Yeah. Life, you have to go sort it out. Whereas, like, he seems to be fairly well, not. He's
pretty. Meal Duinn is a pretty sound lad. Like he comes off well in this story in a way that some of them don't always.
Brought up well. He was brought up well, I'd say.
Brought up well.
Solid.
Yes, nature and nurture. He was like nurtured well by his foster parents. So it's grand about his dad and who.
Yeah.
Let's not mention that.
He overcame that dark heritage.
Like that darkness never manifested itself in Meal Duinn, and there's plenty of opportunity to on this voyage, but he never did. And then when that could have been a thing, when he could have taken the dark path, he ultimately chose the path of light and forgiveness.
And getting locked for a long time.
Getting locked. So he's good crack too.
He's also
that's important. He's a good lad. You hang out with him.
That's one of the key bits of this story. They find magic fruit that makes them the most drunk they've ever been, and they distill it, make some form of deadly poitín, and bring it with them, and they're grand. They're deadly crack for the rest.
You said this really funny thing in the episode that was like, and maybe now they would get through once they found like the poitín apples. It's just like, this is an essential element to the survival. Like they were starving to death and they were losing foster brothers left, right, and center. But when they got to the poitín apples, maybe now they could make it true.
It'll make you a bit optimistic, won't it? A good supply of whiskey in a barrel.
But it's so true. It's so true. Like you have to nourish the soul as well, and you need a bit of crack while you're on your voyage. So like they really found a resource for that in the poitín apples, and like
you meant that in earnest.
And you said it in earnest. And I accepted it in earnest. I just like how earnest it was, and I really like bought it. Like, totally, you'd need that. You'd absolutely need that.
Fucking need it, wouldn't you? Speaking of what we need, we always need a healthy dose of rhythm and music to go along with our stories. And Ru, you did a great job in this one. Do you want to talk us through how you came at this one? Because we did an unusual thing for the podcast in that we split the story. So we had both voices on it, because it is such a very different story between the beginning, middle, and end. So we decided to really hark on that.
And usually in a live show we split it as well. We just take it in turns, one island to the other. because it's kind of a bit long for one teller.
Yeah. So we decided to try and mix it up with this one. So how did you come at this musically?
Yeah, it was grand. I mean, like the usually the function of the music, when if the two of you are doing swappy over stuff like back and forth fast, then the function of the music would be to be a constant groove underneath that to kind of tie things together. The way he presented to me on this episode was different because you're not like going between the islands swapping fast. One, it's Sorcha started and ended, and you do all the Voyage stuff in the middle. So there was this kind of and you presented it so that the last lines, your voices overlap. So like it was a case of kind of giving that a moment of space and kind of clarity between the music, and kind of just honoring that as a little swap over to draw attention to it. And then for the groove of the story, it's just one of those stories that's just like super intuitive, like we were saying, that clip, that pace throughout the whole voyage thing, it's there the whole time, just kind of there. And then there's moments where kind of ends, delves deeper into little something, then they're back on the boat and clips along again. And then other than that, it's just kind of there's a very distinct separate thing to be had between the Ireland scenes at the start and the end. That's the contrast to that clip along. So it's just kind of a matter of sticking down something a little more like less rhythmic, less propelling, a little more melodic. And I tried to do a little thing that at the start and the end. So like you've got the Ireland theme, and it's barer at the start than it is at the end. I kind of like wanted to show that like he's back in the same place, but there has been a fundamental change. So kind of like the instrumentation that happened during the clip along Aron section, the Voyage section, that then remains with the Irish theme at the which is kind of to enhance it.
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, I love that idea of getting that rebirth at the end. You're like, that is the
same but different, you know, like it's the same theme, but he has changed. There has to be a little something that he's taken from the Voyage that is imbued into it.
And did you find that it's funny, kind of now that we're doing sets and we're trying to get ahead of ourselves and do series as we both freak out because we need to record our next series of stories and find the time for that.
No. What are you talking about? We've done that already, Aaron. Remember time travel? This isn't going out until Sunday week.
Great.
So it's already been done. I'm totally relaxed. It's fine.
Ooh, if you're watching this on YouTube, I've just gone cross-eyed.
No, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see him going cross-eyed. If you're listening to this on the podcast, Aaron is pulling faces.
True.
And Sorcha is just like lent in to clarify the matter.
Yeah.
Her job. Okay, when I start spazzing out, she steps in. So the voyages, I guess we've had, this happened kind of with the Death series, the Goddess series, and then you've been kind of finding ways of grouping them together musically. And so how did you kind of feel, because there's so many similarities, and that's one of the reasons we didn't want to do as a series of voyages before, is because they'd be all the same. But we found our ways of making them kind of different and still linking them together. So how did you kind of tackle that challenge kind of from your own pen musically and kind of come at the whole lot of it together, or did you?
Well, yeah, no, like every series, definitely trying to kind of incorporate, like every series has a certain theme, just in that it's all put it in the same key, use the same instrumentation and stuff like that. So like the Brendan the Navigator story and the Meal Duinn story would hopefully sound quite similar in that they would have like similar themes and similar instrumentation, all in the same key. And like, the Brendan story goes in a very similar way, where it's like the start, the voyage, the end kind of thing. So like, they'd sound hopefully cohesive, or they'd sound like a whole.
Great.
And then like the rest of the month was a little more choppy changey. So because there was the collaboration with Fireside, and then there was the Patrick and Oisín within the same month. So like,
and that's a whole other thing, really, because I guess like I mean, like, although we classed, because Oisín is one of the Voyage stories, and you know, because it was March and it was Patrick's Day and everything, we wanted to do that kind of special thing. And this is a show essentially we wrote last year, and we were delighted with it. We wanted to do it to a fuller extent, maybe not as really headstrong as what we did with the Battle of Ventry last summer, where we really tried to kind of make a radio play out of it. And still people have been commenting on our page saying that's my favorite one. So if you haven't checked that story out, that's one we put a whole lot of work into, and it's a 4-parter. And then this one was kind of like, we were going to have a 2-parter, and we're like, fuck, we'll just release a big long episode. And it's a big long episode, and it's an over and back between Sorcha and I again, and there's a lot of music gone into it. So you really went hell for leather on that one, Rude. How did you
went mad on that one altogether? Well, it was just, it ended up being one big hour-long piece. It wasn't quite like the full-on like radio play drama that the Battle of Ventry was, but it wasn't like hugely far removed from it either, because like there was a bit of dialogue in there, and like there was a good bit of over and back between yourself and Sorcha. But yeah, it was fun. It was kind of like at least 3 different podcasts all in one, because it's like it was going between like the present day moment that is the conversations between Oisín and Patrick and everything that happens there, but like they're also going into the backstories, so you get a whole exposition of Oisín's backstory and the Fianna and going to Tír na Nóg and his mad side and all that crack, and then you get a whole and that's like a whole episode in itself, just like thrown in there in 2 different parts. And then there's Patrick's whole backstory, which is another whole big 2 different parts, and the battle with the Caoiltes and all that crack. So it was just kind of like just finding a different rhythm and different instrumentation to like delineate between those 3 different strands, and then fuck it all in together. And it was good crack.
Good.
I'm often reminded of like how like it's great, like it's so funny as like the trio, even just looking back at how we started off together 6 years ago, like my performance kind of acting side of things, Sorcha's abundance of knowledge where she told us the names and everything about this, and then your musical background to set the groove and set the way of creating an atmosphere, and they've really all kind of stayed kind of separate and like they kind of have, and yet linked, and like we're leaning on each other, but 6 years on you can still spot the fucking performer and the one who knows everything, and like you're now doing this because I guess we go so cohesive over our live gigs, we're all doing it together constantly, it's all blending. But now that we've gone off to our different pods, Sorcha's in the shop as I'm recording mine, you're doing the music post story, you know, so you're taking time to go through it, to spot the breaths and the different rhythms and really put your own flavor onto it now, which is like an amazing treat. It's the treat of kind of, well, I guess it's the upside of the lockdown and the shy crack that's going on, is that we have time to be doing this kind of stuff. But it's also like, I don't know, I think it's kind of funny that we have because like I have no idea what it's going to sound like until you put the music on it, which kind of freaks me out because I hate not telling stories with music, whereas Sorcha, you kind of find that easier sometimes.
I don't, I actually don't find it easier. I don't notice it as much, but then I notice that I don't, but then I do kind of miss it because it doesn't throw me as much to not have music, but like I would notice then sometimes, especially if I'm having a hard time formulating a story or getting into a rhythm. Music is one of those funny things because it's kind of, I still remember in rehearsals for Shadows of the Dawn, someone was telling me you have to end this sentence on this beat. That.
I remember that, and you freaked out.
I had a complete.
I don't want to do that.
I had a complete fucking meltdown, and she was like, "But this is what you do that. You always do that. You do that instinctively." And I was like,
in that moment, Oisín was just very briefly trying to like direct you to do something specific like that, when the thing to do is just like let you do it because you always do. Like,
and I was like, "But I don't know how I do it."
Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't want to call it into attention. It's like the caterpillar or the centipede, isn't it? If the centipede thinks about moving all its legs, then he'll just fucking fall over. If he doesn't think about it, he can coordinate the whole movement and he's grand.
Yeah,
like,
that's where the music always is for me, is that it definitely helps, but it's definitely like on some kind of subconscious level where I'm not really looking at it. And if I look at it, I fuck it up.
It's an interesting shift in the dynamic though, because like ye are recording music you're recording the stories and send them on with no music, and then I'm then working off the rhythm that you're giving me, like, because like you always have a certain rhythm going on, and so like I'm kind of playing off your musicality, taking that as a starting point, whereas in a live situation it would be flipped. We'd start playing a groove, and then we set the story to the rhythm of the music to that. But like it's kind of been turned on its head with how we're working in the context of the pandemic remotely.
It is, yeah, and it
works.
One of those.
It's interesting. Like, it's cool. I like one of those. I like having the freedom to just like really super like tailor the music to the words that I've been given. You know, and it works.
No, I'm happy with it, but it took me a while, because I was like, after the, like, what the hell, sitting with the mic and just sitting with the thing. All the Battle of Entry I really struggled with, because I was, because it was so choppy and changey, and I was like, I could never quite get into the flow, and it had to be so specific, and I ended up writing a lot of that for myself, and having to be written. And so then a couple of stories after that, I was writing them very heavily, and then I was realizing I was struggling keeping the rhythm. And so then you have this, like, to know the story, to tell it in the oral tradition, you got to know your beats, you got to know where you can kind of improvise in between them, your ending, the strong points, the names, and blah blah blah. But then to fully fall into flow, I find it just so much more soothing and easing when there's a lovely rhythm going and the music's playing and everything's flowing. We've already kind of said, it's a jaunt, or it's a jig, or it's a whatever. We've kind of said it's going to be this, and make it sad here, and we'll knock it out. But then to completely not have that and try and forward plan what the musicality of the piece will be is a whole other thing, because then we have to go into the soft voice or into the whatever, and kind of be aware of the lull or the stop or the change, which then you must interpret and put music on in your own interpretation. So it's all a bit mad, really. It's like going to the other world and seeing a whole rake of that mad islands and trying to figure it out.
I think it'll be really interesting to see how we, when we get back to doing live performances with audiences, because like obviously we've done a couple of live streams and we've done a couple of shows that we've recorded for people, but like when we get back into a room with audiences, I think it'll be really interesting to see, like, first of all, super looking forward to it, but also I wonder like what this year of being apart from each other has actually, like, I think we'll see the learning when we get back together. I think it'll really come to the fore, and I think it'll really stand to us, because there's something about pulling this apart the way it has that has forced all of us to confront some of our limitations, I think, and have to work through them. And like, we've talked about this as well, Aron, like the kind of difficulty of recording a podcast that we haven't told live, and like having to try and make a story work with no audience in the room with you. Like that's harder. But it's also, like I said, I think it'll stand to us,
It'll absolutely stand to us. And I think, like, actually, weirdly enough, doing the 2 storytelling courses this year, going back over the basics and having some very experienced people in there and some completely inexperienced people in there, has made us look back over the theory, relate stuff to, and seeing what an amazing effect that's had on people and how well it works, and going, oh shit, maybe I do need to consider what the theme of this is, what is the deep meaning of the story, because that will help and bring it through. And it's certainly helped me to go back to the basics of even just a little bit of semiotics and finding out what is it that this thing is trying to portray, because knowing that makes it all of a sudden you're more easily led into that flow state, because you've done the background work and you're kind of more prepped. And speaking of storytelling course, of course, we'll be announcing our next course very, 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 very soon. We've been putting off for a while because we've been kind of tinkering and working with a couple of things that we want to improve upon and make it more interactive and a little bit more polished, let's just say. So our new course is coming very soon. Keep an eye out, contact us. There's big mad waiting list, so it probably will sell, and spaces are limited. But anyway, that's the sales pitch. We'll be doing these for as long as people want us to do them. So right now, people want us to keep doing them, and we love doing them because it's just spreading the skills of storytelling, which essentially we've been doing for years internally. Between all of us, we've all taught each other how to do it.
We'd always kind of give each other notes and about shows and after shows and as we kind of went on, and so it's been great to actually get some of that down on paper and coach people through it, and also we're getting to know some lovely people who are really interested in Irish mythology, and we've had our first open mic storytelling night with our first class group, which we're going to have once a month going forward with the people who've been on the course, so they'll get a chance to get together and perform for each other. And I love that idea. I think that's going to be great, and I think that'll keep going. And again, we'll keep doing that as long as people want to do it.
So much fun, and hopefully it'll be a case where we'll be able to do this. If venues don't feckin' open soon, we'll just be doing more stuff online. But if they do, we'll be doing this type of stuff again in live. And look, we're forever grateful for the fact that we have Patreon support, because that's keeping us going at the moment. So thank you so fucking much for supporting this podcast on patreon.com/Candlelit Tales. It's a massive help. It's just it means we are motivated to do the work, actually try and do the work. Eventually we hope to one day get to the point where we can pay ourselves in not just fancy microphones and stuff to do the work, but for now it's fucking amazing. So thank you so much. We'll just keep on making this kind of content as long as people keep on messages and thanking us for doing it, and thanking us for bringing us back to their own roots and their own kind of diaspora kind of heritage and all that kind of stuff. So that's great. So thank you, and thank you for supporting us by even liking, sharing and subscribing to our YouTube channel, which has been growing in things and followers and all of that. So that's a big thank you from me. Rue, what do we have coming up in our podcast next?
The Invasion series by Candlelit Tales. The earliest of our mythology, the story of the first tribes that came in waves to Ireland, came here. Something fucked up happened, they died out, and another crowd came, and then there was a fight between them, and then the two of them stayed for ages, and then the Celts came along. And it's a good series. Well, it will be a good series.
It will be a good series. I'm sure
it's going to be class.
We've started it by now. You've already heard the first one, and you've already probably started putting music to it. Remember, time travel.
Well, in a sense, we've been working on it for 6 years, because all the Candlelit Tales style has been evolving since 2014.
Nice cover. Yeah, nice.
But we're on top of it. That's what the people need to know.
Super on top of it.
So on it. I know what day it is.
Oh yeah, I love Sundays.
Wait, Monday?
This will be broadcast on a Sunday.
I time warped you. Okay, I think that's all from us. Thanks a million for listening, and slán.
Slán.
Slán.